If you put an intentional father under every household in America, the world would change overnight.
Today, we are joined by Larry Hagner. Larry's the founder and CEO of The Dad Edge. He's the author of the Dad's Edge book. He speaks all over the world, and his mission is to help men become the best version of themselves.
I encourage men to grab these skills of creating an extraordinary marriage, of creating an incredible connection with your kids, of leading yourself, optimizing everything in your life before it's too late. We're preventative in all these other areas of our life, but when it comes to our relationships, unfortunately, all those can wait. They'll be okay. Man, don't wait. Don't wait. If you want to be a more patient father, one strategy is
how did you get to doing this? This is not obviously, nobody goes to school to major in, dad mentorship. So how'd you end up doing this, and what's the backstory, if you would?
For sure. It didn't start very pretty at all. I kind of joke, like I've been doing this now so long that I kind of joke about it now. And I was just on John Bernthal's podcast, the Real Ones, and it was so funny. I actually consider him a friend now. Like we talk every now and again, and he reached out to me like a few months ago asking me to come on the podcast. And here, the funny thing is this, I didn't know who he was. I knew who he was. I just didn't know that was his name. So like I had seen like movies and stuff like that. And so anyway, long story short, I went on his podcast and he told me before we went on the podcast, he's like, dude, he's like, I'm a huge fan. He's like, I actually listened to every single podcast that you release. I have for a while and that kind of thing. So I thought he kind of knew my story. And I thought he knew that I was joking with him, but he didn't. And it was written all over his face. There's a post that I actually pinned to my Instagram because the look on his face is absolutely priceless. So he asked me, he's like, the same question. He's like, how did you even get started in this? And I thought he knew the backstory. So I was just joking with him. And I was like, and I kind of went into this thing. I was like, yeah, man, it was kind of a crazy situation. I woke up on a Sunday morning, and it was like 10 years ago. And I opened up the window and it was early and the sun just hit my face just right. And just had this like divine intervention, like this epiphany that I knew everything there was to know about being a dad and a husband. And I just had to share it with the world. And as I'm saying it out loud, like I'm halfway through exactly what, and I could see it on his face. He's like, oh my God, he's somewhat buying into what I'm saying. Like he doesn't know that I'm joking. And he was just like, you could see it on his face. He's like, oh my God, like who have I invited onto my this guy is so full of crap. And I finally looked at him. I was like, dude, I'm just messing with you. And all of a sudden he's like, oh, come on. Like he just went like, I was like, dude, we just laughed and laughed and laughed. I was like, oh my God, no, man. I was like, it was so horrible. I was like, it was so dark, man. I was like, it was not a good beginning. Like if the beginning would have been where we're at now, it would have been horrible. So basically, I grew up like with this revolving door of just male toxicity, like father figures that would be, and it was either men that my mom was married to, or she was dating, or a guy that was living with us. There was always a new dude, right? But it was the same guy, just different face, different name. So toxic, abuser, drinker. I don't know about drugs or not. I can't confirm nor deny, but it was not good. So my mom was married though. And then had me. And then after she had me, they got divorced like right away. And so I had no recollection of my biological father. I had no idea actually my mom was married before. So like literally I was 4 years old, and I remember like, kids from my preschool being picked up by their dads, and I knew what a dad was. And I just figured in my 4-year-old brain, like moms go out and find dads. Like kids magically appear by the stork, and then moms go out and find dads somewhere along the way. And I didn't bother me. I was just like, well, my mom just hasn't found my dad yet. So that's cool. She will. And so I'll never forget being 4. My mom pulled me aside one day and she's like, hey, I'm having a friend over for dinner tonight. And he's like a very special friend to me. And I really want you to meet him. And I was like, I was like, what? And so immediately in my mind, I was like, oh my God, she found the dad, like found the guy. Right. So this guy comes over. I didn't say anything to my mom about that. And like literally this guy comes walking in my house. I'm 4 years old. He's wearing a 3-piece suit, trench coat, double Windsor tie, feathered hair, mustache, briefcase. He was a data software engineer. So he was a white collar guy. And he came walking in, and my mom introduces me to him, and I shook his hand, and literally the first thing that rolled out of my mouth and onto this poor guy was, "Are you going to be my dad?" Like, that was the first question I asked this poor dude. And I think my mom kind of took that as like a Jerry Maguire thing, like that part in Jerry Maguire where Renee Zellweger sees, you know, the little guy hug Jerry Maguire. She's like, "Oh my God, like this is a sign, like I should marry this guy." And I think my mom kind of felt the same. And they did get married, and they were together for 6 years, and he adopted me. And I was like, "Oh my God, that's great." She found the dad, the family complete. Well, they were married for about 6 years, and every year they were together, it just got really progressively worse. My dad, my stepdad was a really bad drinker. So was my mom. And just, it was horrific, man. Like the abuse and the beatings and the yelling and the screaming and the drunkenness, like it was crazy. There were some good times too, don't get me wrong, but there was a lot of bad shit that happened. When I was 10, they got divorced and he moved out, and that was the end. And I never saw my dad. I never saw him again. And in my mind, he was my dad, like, cause he adopted me. I still have this.
He legally adopted you?
Yeah. The reason my name's Larry Hagner, not Larry Boyd, is because he adopted me, and that's my legal name. So right when I was like 10, 11, I was like, wait a second, this guy came in at like 4, and I now know the birds and bees. So who the hell's my dad? I started asking my mom these questions. I'm like, where did I come from? And she told me, she was like, I was actually married before Joe. And that was his name. And I was like, what, really? And she's like, yeah. I was like, for how long? And she's like, 4 years. And showed me the wedding album. I was like, oh my God. I was like, I kind of even look like this dude. Where is he? What does he do? Like, and she's like, I don't know. I have no idea. We haven't spoken. And I was like, holy shit, man. Like, I have a dad out there. So anyway, it just kind of like was here and there. Well, when I was 12, just a couple of years later, I won't get into it just for the sake of time, but I had an opportunity to meet him, and it was not planned. It was totally by accident. And it was surreal, man. He was remarried at the time, had a 2-year-old son, another one on the way. And the first day we met, man, I'll never forget it. Like, I literally felt like my life was complete. Like, oh my God, this is my dad. And I immediately started calling him dad. I just wanted, man, I wanted it so bad, you know, for him to be in my life. And he was for about 6 months. And we hung out like every week, and he came to my little league games and stuff like that. And then after a while, I just noticed like drifting started to happen. And I'll never forget being 12, and I picked up the phone one day and I called him, and I'm like, hey man, like, what's going on? I just feel like things aren't the same. And I don't remember even what was said. I really don't. All I remember was how it ended. And it ended with the feeling of, this is not going to work. And we drifted, and we cut ties there, and that sucked. And I really hit a dark time. And I mean, dude, I overate because I was a fat kid. I failed the 8th grade. My mom, it just became a revolving door of just different dudes at that point. But I turned my life around. You know, I had to do 8th grade twice, I actually got into a really good high school, then went on to college, graduated college, married my college sweetheart, got into medical device sales, a very lucrative career. And I was 30 years old, married, and my first son on the way. I'm in a Starbucks for a business meeting. Hadn't seen my dad in 18 years. And my dad came in that Starbucks that morning and decided to get his morning coffee. And I recognized him. I hadn't seen him in 18 years. And that interaction turned into what it is now, been 17 years later, and I've got a relationship with him. But going back to your question of how did Dad Edge get started, I had a horrible experience growing up with dads and men. And I was like, man, on my watch, this will not happen. This won't happen. I'm going to do this right. I'm going to do this well. And to be quite frank, I wasn't doing it well. I was your typical guy who is isolated, stressed out, overwhelmed, all kinds, you know, just typical dude, you know, just struggling. And Dad Edge got started, sadly, because when my oldest was 6 and my youngest at the time was 4, I had a really bad day at work, really stressed out, lost my biggest customer, was going to impact our income for the next 18 months. My son, I always told myself, I'm never going to hit my kids out of anger, ever, because I knew what that felt like. And my 4-year-old stepped out of line, as any 4-year-old would. I roll my eyes when I tell the story now. I'm like, you're such an idiot, you know. But I spanked him, and I did it just in a reaction and I spanked him hard enough where unfortunately he lost his footing and he fell. And when I saw my 4-year-old son topple over because it was my hand on him, I knew immediately. I was like, oh my God, what did I just do? And I went to pick this, but it got worse. I went to pick him up and he shuddered, like put his hands up, like I was going to hurt him again. And I was like, oh my God, like what the hell have I just done? Like, it's like this outer body experience. And I picked him up, he was crying. And my wife, who is the most supportive, loving, appreciative, never talks down to me, just was like, what the hell? Like, Larry, he's 4. Like, come on. My wife doesn't talk to me like that. I don't talk to her like that. And when she did that, I was like, I knew. And it was that night, man. I was like, I literally waved the white flag. I was like, I'm done. I gotta figure this out. And here's how Dad Edge got started. I really started looking at my life, man. I'm like, what am I good at? And I was good at sales because that was my job. I was good at martial arts because I was taking martial arts. And I was great at fitness and nutrition because I had a 4-year degree in that. And I started looking at those 3 areas. I'm like, why am I good at these things? Well, I'm good at these things because I'm in training, or I've been trained. I've had a community around me to help me. I have a mentor. I have people who are ahead of me. I have other students with me that I do life with. And I'm usually teaching somebody else something, right? And that was like a huge epiphany, because I was like, what have I done for fatherhood? And what have I done for a husband? Nothing, like 0. So like, well, of course I suck at it. Like, I haven't learned anything. I have the desire, but I haven't learned anything. So it was in that moment, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to learn. And that's how Dad Edge got started. Dad Edge has always been, always will be, a learning community. Nobody gets to the top of this mountain and was like, I'm not there. Like, I will never say like, I am the end all be all guru of fatherhood and being a husband. Do I know a thing or two? Absolutely. Have I arrived? No. And I never will. I will constantly keep learning no matter what. And that's what Dad Edge really is. This is just a way for all of us to learn together.
Well, there's a lot in that story. I actually got emotional at the part about when you spanked your kid, which I'll unpack. I wasn't being maudlin and getting emotional at that moment. There's a particular reason that really taps into what I'm all about, and I'll explain that. But I want to actually back up. First of all, and go all the way to the irony of your opening conversation you talked about with John Bernthal, which, by the way, I hope you made a Walking Dad joke.
I didn't, but now I'm wishing I would have.
Yeah, like text it to him or something. But anyways, your joke about like, well, I mean, of course, I'm the Dad Edge guy because clearly I was the best dad. I was the ultimate supreme authority on dadness. And so I decided to share my gifts with the world, right? The irony. But what's so ironic about that is how many people think that they can't start the movement, or they can't find their life's purpose, or they can't heed their calling because they don't think of themselves as the supreme enlightened authority on X, Y, Z, whatever that thing is, right? There are actual people who, unless they could seriously say that's why they started their thing, they're scared to start their thing, right? And then most of us that do start a thing, we spend the whole time thinking, I'm not qualified to do this thing. We have imposter syndrome, right? And eventually we grow through that and evolve. But I thought it was ironic that you said as a joke, what a lot of people have convinced themselves is actually a precondition / limitation for why they're not doing what they're probably called to do in their life.
Right.
So I just wanted to call that out because, I mean, we have a very entrepreneurial audience, and I think it's safe to say we have a very human audience, although I would be flattered if it had branched beyond that, frankly. But the reason I say that is because entrepreneur or not, every human has a calling. Every human has a destiny. It's in the word fulfillment. People think that, well, if I want to be fulfilled, I need to eat cheesecake or, find the perfect girl or whatever. No, the word fulfillment literally means fulfillment of prophecy, fulfillment of your destiny, right? Like there's something that we're all preordained to do, I believe anyways. And I think that, and the other thing I love about the story that you told is that our calling, we're like, well, how do I know? Where do I go? Who do I consult to find my calling? There's breadcrumbs of your calling throughout your entire life. All of your life experience around fatherhood or being on the receiving end, for better or for worse, is exactly why you're qualified to do what you do. And it's exactly why you're supposed to be doing what you're doing, right? And, for me, it was we talked a little before the show about like what I'm really all about in terms of educational reform and trying to disrupt and modernize education. That was all predetermined for me by getting bullied, teased, ostracized, marginalized, and even sort of academically abused. My story the details don't really matter, but basically I had such a shitty experience with the school system that it was inevitable for me that when I finally opened myself up to ask the question, why am I on this earth beyond mere provision, sustenance, or procreation, or whatever it is that we try to hold on to and think that we're living just because we're surviving? Why am I here? It was like, oh, it was there the whole time. My nemesis has been rearing its head since I was 3 years old, right? My dragon to slay. And so I think the story you told was just such a beautiful explication of probably a deep, but sadly, usually unrealized truth of virtually every person's life, which is that the signs have always been there. And there's a moment of opportunity when it will be yours to step into. And that if you take seriously what Larry said as a joke, this idea that you have to have it all figured out before you can start, then you'll die without ever having started. And that's guaranteed regret. So thank you for basically taking my whole life philosophy and articulating it in the form of a story. I appreciate it. I'll pay you later. It's like we rehearsed it or something.
That's so funny, man.
Yeah. So anyways, I guess the dadness, you mentioned there's so much to talk about. Nobody ever arrives at the top of that mountain. How did it start? Like what is step one to becoming a dad authority leader?
It's funny you asked that question, because I don't really view myself that way, at all. The funny thing is I know other people, like I it's so funny, man. If I'm on other podcasts, like people like I've been referred to as the godfather of fatherhood. I'm like, that's hilarious. Or like an OG, like, or the guy, and I'm like, I don't look at myself that way, like at all. I actually view myself the opposite. I'm like, I'm actually the first one in line still trying to learn this thing. Like, to be quite honest, that's why, like yesterday I interviewed Mike Rowe, from the guy from Dirty Jobs.
Of course.
And he was firing questions at me, which I loved. He's just like, why do you do this? And I'm like, I do this so I can learn. He's like, really? And he was like, kind of like shocked to hear that. I was like, yeah, man. He's like, you've been doing this 8 years. I know. I know. Like, I'm still learning. And he was like, dude, he's like, that's the mentality to have. Like the hunger to be a lifelong student. That's what actually makes somebody a knowledge expert. It's not the person that's like, I am now a black belt, so I know everything there's to know about martial arts. It's actually the black belt that says, now my training begins. Right. And I remember when I was in martial arts, that's what my instructor used to say all the time. He was like, a lot of people think black belt is the end. It's actually the beginning. All the belts that lead up to black belt are just now a gateway into like, okay, well, now you're a student. It's just taking you this long to get here. So to answer your question, I personally think it's our responsibility, my responsibility, and all men, all of our responsibility, that we identify as a lifelong learner of this, right? Of marriage, of parenthood, of being a man, of being a good human being, just being a lifelong learner, right? Because it's really our ego that protects us, that gets in the way of all of these beautiful things that we could learn. But our ego will protect us and say that we should know this automatically, or that we shouldn't need help, or we shouldn't need community, or we shouldn't need support. We should just be able to do this all on our own. I have a news flash for everybody. Anybody who is ever successful in anything did not get there by themselves. Elon Musk didn't get to the top of the tower like he has on his own. he did it because he constantly evolved and learned. How can I make this Tesla a better car? What else needs to be done? How can I learn how to do that? What can I create, to make sure that I'm doing the right things? And he's still not done. Nobody is done. But to answer your question, it's really just the hunger and the desire to just continually learn. And, the universe has this way of, anytime you think that you are at like the top or you have figured it out, there's another curveball that comes your way. So like, for instance, I could tell you a thing or two about how to raise little boys, but now I'm in the season of learning what it really takes to raise teenagers, and every day is a little different. Every day I have a 17-year-old. I've never had a 17-year-old my entire life. I'm 9 months away from having an 18-year-old. I'm 9 months away from having an adult child.
Mm-hmm.
That's freaky, man. Right. And that comes with a whole new set of skills that I now need to learn to be able to help him and inspire and influence and continue to raise him into this young man. It's not going to, what helped me to be a good father for him at 9, 10, 11 years old is not going to be the same skills and tactics that are going to help me be the man that he needs me to be for him at 18. It's just, so there's always learning, always.
So I want to set the stage for my actual question, but first, can you give me a little bit of data? So you've been doing, you said that inflection moment was 17 years ago when you sort of went in this direction of becoming a fatherhood knowledge seeker.
No, it was it was 10 years ago, and okay. I started the podcast 8 years ago. 17 years ago is when I just had my first son.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so 10 years ago, 8 years ago, when was it that you had that bad day with device sales and
10 years ago?
That was 10 years ago. Okay, so that was when you're like, okay, I need to approach this like I've been approaching martial arts or my job, or, essentially I want to become intentionally proficient at this thing. In that moment, this show is called Unlock Your Potential, right? So I want to use that moment as a representation. So tell me what has happened since then in terms of, you started a podcast. What else does the movement consist of? Do you have any numbers as far as downloads or people impacted? Like, package it up for me if you would.
Yeah, sure. So since inception of the podcast, right, I've done over 1,030, I think, to date. Over 30 million downloads on the podcast, about 500,000 downloads per month, easy. We're, for the 4th year in a row, we're the #1 dad podcast on iTunes and Apple and Spotify. We're down, and the podcast is downloaded in 177 countries. From a data perspective, our reach now, from a social media perspective, with all the channels combined, is probably at 300,000 or so, give or take. And then we started Dad Edge Alliance Mastermind. So it's a group coaching platform for, it's for men, husbands, fathers, those three people, or I would say one and the same, right? I've been doing that now for 7 years. We have about 850 men that we help on the daily at this point. And we literally have skills that we teach these men every single day, every single month, to help them be better men, better husbands, to lead from the front, better fathers, more patient, more calm. But if you're really wanting data, here's a fascinating thing. So we have men who apply to be a part of the group. So you have to fill out a quick 6-question application. And we do that actually, you want to hear psychologically why we do this?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, as a marketer, please. Yeah.
You'll probably find this fascinating. So, I know the traffic that hits that landing page for our alliance, and I know the numbers, and I also see the completion rate on the application, which is 6 questions. Probably takes you 3.5 minutes at the most to fill it out, because most of them are multiple choice questions. So, we get about 100 to 150 completed applications per month. for men who are interested in joining us. Out of all those applications, and we have thousands of them now to date over the past 7 years, 80% have identified that the reason that they want to join is because they want to create a better connection with their wife. So marriage is a huge thing for these guys. Huge. And to be honest, like if you show me any successful man, or I would say fulfilled man in life, whether it's in parenting or professionally or whatever, usually he's got a pretty on point marriage. Like, because that's like the first domino that can, like, literally the rest will fall. If you have a man who has a marriage that's crumbling, his mental and emotional health is probably not going to be the best. His physical health probably won't be the best. His professional career probably won't be the best. His patience with his kids probably won't be the best. But you fix that one thing. I'm not saying it's the end all be all, but it's a very powerful domino that will help him operate at a much higher level in his life. So 80% of men who, out of the thousands of applications we've gotten, have identified as like, that's what I want. So here's the interesting thing, though, from a marketing perspective, right? Or from just someone who's just interested, right? Guess what the completion rate of that application is?
On 6 questions, I'm going to guess 10% at most.
Ooh, it's actually 28.6%.
Okay.
So
because you have a pretty curated list. Like, I run cold traffic online, so my expectations of people's follow through are like abysmal. So I'm actually impressed you get 28%.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've got so many podcasts out now, and I can't even tell you how many men have applied or joined, and they'll say, like, I've been thinking about this for 2 years. And I'm like, 2 years? I didn't join 2 years ago. We could have.
Do you have an email list so you kind of keep those people nurtured? Yeah.
And I would say I don't even like to use the word nurtured. I just like, I'll be very honest. Whether
forgive me, my marketer showed
right. No,
for a minute, right?
No, I get you, man. I totally understand. And it's funny when I hold team meetings, people use terms like sales and conversions. I'm like, we're not going to use those words. Just not, because these are people. Okay. And these are marriages, and these are families. These are not conversions. These are men that we're helping. So as far as like a nurturing and that kind of thing, like, I view it as, I don't care if a guy is paying me money or not, or if he is investing in himself or not. If one email changes the trajectory of this man's life, like, so if he learns the skill set of generative questions, like, because that's one of our emails, like, hey, if you want to just change the connection with your wife, instead of asking how was your day, just ask her what the best part of her day is. Listen to her, reflect back, ask for more detail. Like, that's it. And I can't even tell you how many guys have replied to that email being like, dude, she lit up, or dude, she was in tears. I'm like, mission accomplished, right? Whether they're joining our mastermind or not. But I will tell you that, so the reason we do the application is because that's a test. It's really a test. Are you a tire kicker or are you an executor? If you can't finish 6 questions on an application that will probably take you 3.5 minutes, are you really going to put an hour of your time in per week? The answer is going to be a big fat no. So the interesting thing is we could probably, the mastermind community would probably go from 800 to 1,500 in 2 months if I took the application off and just put a join now button. But I'm not going to do that. I don't know if I'll ever do that, because like, I feel like it waters down the community with people who just, quite frankly, aren't serious. And I don't want to take somebody's money or investment that they're paying for them to do nothing. I want them to get something. I want them to be in the group, or that they have graduated our program being like, that was the change I needed. That was it. And thank God for it, because now I have a marriage that is the best it's ever been. I have patience with my kids. I'm the healthiest physically, mentally, and emotionally I've ever been. I know more about being a leader than I did before. That's what we want, right? That's what we want. That's how we change the world. And my COO will even use terms like, this is how we take over the world. And I don't mean that from like a diabolical standpoint, but to put good into the world and put good in the minds and the hearts of these men so they can create these amazing connections under their own roof, because when you do that, when you create these amazing connections under your own roof, and then you go back out in the world, you're going to bring more good into the world. And that's what we mean. It's like this ripple effect of goodness.
So I appreciate the thoughtful, descriptive answer. And I frankly appreciate the check of like, hey, this isn't data. These are people, right? I mean, while you were talking, I actually pulled up Entra's numbers, and it's it's June 13th. We're recording this, and we've generated just shy of 66,000 leads so far. Free opt-in ebook leads, right? So far this month, and it's like, shit, that's 66,000 human beings that are actually going to read something that I wrote walking around outside my gym at 4:00 in the morning, dictating into my phone. Like that experience it's just so different. I'm just thinking like the human transference and connection, as opposed to just, oh, sweet, 66,000 leads, what's our CVR conversion rate, and what's our take rate, and blah, blah, blah. Like, so thank you. Thanks for that perspective. It's a reminder of what's most important. And as a business principle, this idea of creating, crafting the experience, the ultimate experience that you would want to have as your customer for one person, and then scaling that and that only, rather than saying, hey, let me compromise between what I'd like to create and what I think I can scale, because then you're just everybody else. And it sounds like we're on the same page there. So I appreciate that. The reason I was asking for the data wasn't so we could have, you show me yours, I'll show you mine. It was, marketers, we do that sometimes. And even that term marketers, like purveyors of a mission, purpose, cause, product, service, whatever, right? We tend to do that, right? But the reason I asked is because everything that you just described, tens of millions of downloads, thousands of people impacted, hundreds of people supported on a daily basis, it was all packaged up as a big bang not yet heard inside of one frustrated medical sales device rep who just spanked his kid.
100%.
It was all there. That when I talk about unlock your potential, that's what, this is for the audience. Like whatever, you're stuck in traffic right now, you're on the subway right now, you just had a good day at work, you just had a bad day at work, you just hit your numbers, you just fell short of your numbers, you just had a fight with your wife, you just had candlelight dinner with your wife, whatever, doesn't matter. Good, bad, day to day. There's a potential inside you that's the same. It's different from me and it's different from Larry, but it's also the same principle, right? That everything Larry described has happened since that moment was already present in that moment, waiting to be unlocked by choice.
100%.
By decision. Yeah. So talk to me about that moment. I mean, a lot of people make a lot of decisions and commitments, New Year's resolutions. We've all seen how empty the gym is by February or March. Like, what was different about that one that 10 years later, you're still doubling down on it every day?
Because I know it's at stake here. I mean, I want to speak to what you just said, because I think there's a valid point that I want to make here for just human beings in general, and just our psyche and our mentality and how we go about things, right? You mentioned the gym. I got my degree in sports medicine with a minor in nutrition. Graduating college, I was going to go into corporate wellness. And then I decided, I don't know if I really like that. I really love health and wellness, but I don't know if I want to do that for a living. And I love people. So I loved sales, loved it. And it wasn't because of, I just loved being around people, and solving problems. That's really what I loved about sales. I mean, the money was just like, oh, this is kind of cool that I get paid for this. But I really love being like, hey, Larry, help me solve this problem. Right. So, but going back to what you were saying, because I know what's at stake. If you look at the world around me, some of it makes me absolutely freaking sick, man. And Meg Meeker said this. Meg Meeker is the best-selling author of Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters, My Father the Hero. She's a huge advocate for dads. She even said this. She said, if you put an intentional father under every household in America, the world would change overnight. The entire world. If you just did it in our country alone, right? If you look at the statistics of bad things that happen to kids, it usually came from either a fatherless environment or it came from a dad who wasn't intentional and was just a zombie. Those are the two factors. Nothing against moms. Moms, oh my God. Strong mother in the house? Yes, awesome. Strong dad in the house or not, that will make or break a society. Sorry, not sorry to inform you. Google the statistics. They speak for themselves. It's like 88% of incarcerated people come from a broken home where there was no father or an abusive one. So that impact is really real. And that's not even including teen suicides, drug use, pregnancy, rapist, all these things. But here's the thing. This is where I'm a very empathetic, compassionate, approachable human being. And I love people and I love to get people at their heart. But there are some times where I want to punch you in the face as an individual, because I'm like, if you don't see what's at stake here, there's a serious problem. So like, let me give you an example. There are three types of men out there, three types of human beings, but let's just talk about men. There is there's the victim, there's the zombie, and there's the executor. And all of us can identify with one of those three, and I'll explain each one. And chances are is you are probably one of those three in different areas. So you might be a victim in your marriage, but you might be an executor in your finances, right? You might be a victim in your finances, but you're an executor in your health, right? You might be a zombie in your parenting, but you're an executor in owning your business and creating like a real estate empire or something like that, right? So the victim will tell you every single reason why they can't be successful. I come from a broken home. My mom was married 3 times, so that's why I couldn't figure out how to be married. My mom was a narcissist alcoholic, so like I was never safe to talk about my feelings, so therefore I don't talk about my feelings, and I can't be vulnerable with anybody. That's actually me I'm talking about, but I do the opposite because I'm not the victim, right? There was a time in my life years and years ago I was that, and that was my story. And guess what? Victims will not only tell you why they can't be successful, but they subconsciously look for proof. So like if they say, I'm not a good communicator because I was raised that way, I could never communicate, I don't have the skills. And then when I have a blow up with my wife, I'll be like, see, I told you I can't communicate. Like literally it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So that's the victim. The content zombie is a step above the victim, because now they're just like, I'm kind of tired of being a victim. I'm tired of my life being like this. So I'm going to read books. I'm going to consume podcasts. I'm going to watch YouTube videos. So they're information, right? They're hungry for the information. These are like, I love when people come and join us and they'll be like, dude, like I listen to, and I'm not kidding, I listen to 6 hours of podcasts a day. I'm like, God bless. Why? Is anything like in your life moving, or is it just information in, right? So the content zombie is hungry, but they're usually not doing anything about it. They're like, I'm reading all these books, I'm listening to all these podcasts, but like my marriage isn't getting better. My patience isn't getting better. My health isn't getting better. I don't know what's wrong. Well, it's because you haven't chosen one strategy to double down on and then go do it like the executor does. So like, I'll give you an example. So like, hey, listen, if you want to be a more patient father, one strategy is you've got to have a solid morning routine, because patience actually starts when your feet hit the ground in the morning. It does not start when your kids are acting out. It actually starts by you getting your head right, your physicality right, everything right before the day starts, right? So that's where patience actually starts. The other thing too is like, so that's a tactic. Be like, hey, listen, if you want to improve your patience, just for right now, all I want you to do is get a solid 15-minute morning routine to set your mind, your heart, and your body in the right direction. That's a tactic. The executor would be like, done, I'm doing it. That's what I'm going to do. And they do it, and they're religious about it. So I think, unfortunately, the world, and right now with the information at our fingertips, the world is filled with victims, and it's filled with people who are consuming so much content that they don't even know what to do with. And that's where like a program like you have, like I have, which is group coaching, which it sounds self-serving, but I am such a believer in it, not because I do it, because I've been a part of it. Funny story is this. I joined my first mastermind in 2015, and I thought it was like snake oil. And I'll never forget the lead facilitator, the guy who ran the whole thing. I ran into him, through a podcast. He was older than me. His name's Aaron Walker. He runs a program called ISI. It's a great program. Iron sharpens iron. And I went to him and I said, hey, I'm really trying to figure out, marriage and fatherhood, and if I can do anything with Dad Edge and that kind of thing. He's like, yeah. He's like, why don't you join our mastermind? And I was like, well, what's a mastermind? He's like, it's a group of like-minded men who share a similar vision. We all help each other and we hold each other accountable. I'm like, okay, well, what does that look like? He's like, well, you meet every Monday at 10 a.m. and it's $500 a month. And I was like, I don't have $500 a month. And that just sounds ridiculous to me. And he's like, oh, yeah, I'm sure it would. And Aaron has been in a mastermind with Dave Ramsey for the past 25 years and Dan Miller and, Abraham something, I can't remember, but all of these guys are like ridiculously successful. And they all pinpointed to one thing. I got around the right people. And I told him, I was like, I can't do that. He's like, let me ask you a question. He goes, I want you to fast forward your life 1 year from now. And if you learn nothing new, did nothing different, where's Dad Edge going to be? Where's your marriage going to be? Where are you going to be as a man, husband, and father? He's like, I literally want you to think about it 1 year from today, a year of your life. And he's like, call me back within 24 hours with your answer. I think it took 11 minutes because I was so focused on the cost, $500 an hour of my time. It sounds ridiculous, that I wasn't thinking about the long game of what I could learn from these other guys. I was like, ugh. And it was a very disturbing vision to me. I was like, you know what? I'll try it. And I did it. It was the best decision I've ever made in my life. So much so that when I was a part of it, my entire world opened up. And I was like, holy crap. Like, these are the guys that I've been starving to be around. These are the guys that like literally help. These are not the guys I go drink beer with and watch football. These are the guys that are just like, hey man, how's your communication with your wife? How's your sex life? Are you guys aligned on parenting? If not, what can we help you with? Like all these things that you never get to talk about, suddenly you get to talk about. And I literally think that that is what the world is missing. Like, if you really look at a human, and I'll finish with this because I know this is long, but if you really look at human beings, we are community, tribal beings. The worst torture you can ever put a human being through is to put them in isolation, right? Shawshank Redemption, put the guy in the hole. It is freaking mental, emotional, physical torture to be left alone. Unfortunately, physically, we're not alone. We're surrounded by people. Mentally, emotionally, and even spiritually, we're usually lone wolfing everything. That's a very lonely, dangerous, unfulfilled life, because that's not how, quite frankly, human beings are wired to be.
So gosh, so much to dig into and so little time. We're almost out of time, but I want to say I really love the victim, zombie, executor paradigm. And I see you got your boy there. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see the Dad Edge.
Yeah, man. We started this space shuttle last night, and he actually finished it this morning. I was on, you did it without me. It's hurtful. Yeah, just kidding. Oh, he's building a truck now.
Oh, before I'm not even finished yet.
It looks awesome, man. Good job.
Good to see you, bud. Welcome to the Unlock Your Potential podcast. Right. Our unannounced guest, special guest.
Yeah, he this is Lawson. He actually jumped in on. Do you know who Chris Voss is?
Yeah. I've actually had him on the show.
Oh yeah. So Lawson bombed an interview I did with Chris Voss, and Chris and Lawson had this conversation with me. It was hilarious, man.
I love that.
Yeah. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
No, it's of course. So I was not the victim zombie executor framework is really, really insightful for me. sad to say, I love all my customers and students and participants in my Entre platform. So I don't mean to be disparaging, but I will say we do sometimes have a bit of a zombie problem. And that's honestly why our process is set up the way it is. I mentioned 66,000 leads, 1,700 what we call front-end customers, all of that to generate so far this month 157 students that are actually investing at the, what I would call the real high impact, meaningful layer of our curriculum, to go through 66,000 consumers of information, potential zombies, we don't know, to whittle it down. We're testing for, essentially micro commitments, right? It's the same as your application. Like you use a 6-question application. I have an opt-in followed by a 120-page, 40,000-word ebook, which is much bigger than most of the free ebooks online, because I actually want people to have to plow through something that's thorny and thick and substantive and real to get to the opportunity to try one of our starter courses, which range anywhere from $3 to $39. Nobody's changing their life for $3, but it allows you to, see what we're all about, but also prove to us that you'll not only, look, it's $3. If you don't like it, you can have it back. We have an easy refund policy, but we're really looking to say who's going to actually consume this $3 or $7 or $39. Again, we have different feeder courses, but like it's a few hours of content, but it's dense, it's high value, and it's purely a filter. And we put people through all those hurdles. Like I said, 66,000 free opt-in leads this month just to whittle it down to 157 people that we're actually supporting in, an entrepreneurial path to transform their life. I think it's really the difference between information and transformation. Like we use information to invite people in and give them kind of a try before you buy experience of what it might be like to say yes to real transformation. And that's the difference, I think. But that's what's available to people if they execute, is getting past the information and into the transformation. But to your point, it's actually a very small number. I know we're technically over time, and if you have to go, we can end it. If not, I would love to ask you one more question. To what do you attribute that distinction, that small percentile of people that are willing to go past zombie information consumer and into executor at a massive, disruptive, transformative level that, probably ends up turning their whole life on its head if they really go all in with it? Like, what's the difference? And frankly, how do we bottle it and give it to more people?
So there's a lot of things. So if I give you like maybe a buffet of things that I think might really identify this person's courageous.
Yeah.
Right. This person doesn't have an ego that is protecting. They can override that ego or that voice of like, oh, you shouldn't need any help. You should just be able to do it on your own. You should know how to do it. What's wrong with you? Like all these stories, right, that we don't let other people in on. It takes a courageous person to be like, help here, please. Help.
Mm-hmm.
Like, listen, I think it's also a person who has a sense of urgency. Like there's one precious thing that I do not like to waste, and that's my time. I will never have an ego to the point where I'm not going to go into Lowe's and ask wherever I need to find something. I walk into Lowe's looking for something, and I find the first person working there and I ask them what aisle it's in, because I don't want to be the guy walking up and down the aisles be like, where's the hell is the PVC pipe? Like, it's much easier to ask an expert, be like, where's PVC pipe? It's aisle 17 on the right-hand side, third row down. You'll see it right in the middle. Are you kidding me? How much time and frustration and mental bandwidth you just saved me just by telling me that? Let's go. Boom. Right? So it takes a courageous person. It also takes a person who has a sense of urgency to be like, I'm not going to waste this time. My kids are only going to be 17, 15, 9, and 7 once. I'm not going to waste this time. So I think it takes a person who's confident, who's courageous, who has a sense of urgency and knows that life should not be on what I call the drift. The drift is that wash, rinse, repeat, unfulfilled, quiet desperation, isolation. I don't want to be on my deathbed being like, damn, coulda, woulda, shoulda. If you really think about what an executor does, is this is the way I make decisions now, is am I going to regret this when I'm on my deathbed? Because that day will come, right? I'll give you one really quick example. I took my oldest son out to Vegas because I had a bunch of podcast spots I was going to be on, that kind of thing. And when I travel, I take my kids with me. I'm really big with grabbing life by the balls and experiencing things, right? So I'm wearing this shirt right now. It says Gunship Helicopters. And that's because we found a place where you could actually shoot a machine gun out of an Apache helicopter in the desert of Vegas. And it was expensive. And my son was like, are you sure you want to do this? And I'm like, let me ask you something. I was like, we will never regret spending $1,600 to shoot a machine gun out of a helicopter for an hour, ever. You'll be 60, 70 years old and still remember doing that with your old man, and so will I. So I'm okay with that, right? It's like this sense of urgency to freaking live life, right? And I think a lot of people don't get that, but here's the warning I want to finish with. I encourage men. I desperately want to grab you by the shoulders, by your heart, by your soul and your mind to help you grab these skills of creating an extraordinary marriage, of creating an incredible connection with your kids, of leading yourself, optimizing everything in your life before it's too late. And what I mean by that is we look at preventative care in other areas of our life like that's a no-brainer. Of course I'm going to do that. Let me ask you, Jeff, when was the last time you were at the dentist?
It's probably been 2 months.
Okay. When was the last time you had an oil change?
Yeah, I mean, it was the regularly scheduled one that my car told me to do. And my last car, it was probably less than a year ago.
Would you wait till your engine was on fire before you're like, I should probably get the oil changed?
No, I would not do that.
No. And you probably wouldn't wait until your teeth are falling out of your head till you'd be like, I should probably go to the dentist.
This is true.
Yeah. Unfortunately, in other areas of our lives as men, we wait for that 911. And that's, and here's what I tell men. When guys come in and join us and they're like, my life is pretty good. There's some things that are, but it's okay. I always tell guys that is your optimal learning because you're hungry and you're not desperate.
Yeah.
Think about it like this. You flip on your light switch, you see a spark in your house. You're like, ooh, I need to call the electrician. And it's a very easy call. You're like, hey man, I just flipped on my switch and there's a spark. I think you should come out today and take a look at it. Is that cool? Yeah. Okay, cool. They come out, they fix it, done deal. Versus like, oh, I saw a spark. Oh, I saw another spark. And then suddenly they're running out of their house, grabbing all their photo albums, their computer, everything. Oh my God, my house is on fire. Please send the fire department really, really quickly. They're desperate, right? They're freaking out. The amygdala, fight or flight or freeze, is going crazy because their house is on fire. So we're preventative in all these other areas of our life, but when it comes to our relationships, unfortunately, those can wait. It'll be okay. Man, don't wait. Don't wait. Treat it like your teeth. Treat it like your car. Treat it like the spark that you see when you flip on that light switch. Because if you are waiting, I just got a text this morning from a guy who told his daughter that him and his wife are getting a divorce. He just joined our program. He literally stated, if I would have joined their program 6 months ago, I probably wouldn't be having this conversation of divorce with my daughter. And I'm like, dude, and it's a perfect example of like waiting too long. Don't do that. It's the same thing with like, last thing I'll say is this. So many people, you mentioned the gym, right? So many people will wait until that heart attack or stroke until they're like, I should probably start taking better care of myself. Dude, you should have been taking better care of yourself 20 years ago, right? Don't wait until your chest is cracked open and they're doing bypass surgery. Like, get that stuff straight now, right? So that's the final message I really have for these guys.
I love it. I love it, man. A good friend of mine, he's actually our chief transformation officer at Entra, runs all of our personal development events and programs. And he always tells this story about taking, hypothetical person taking their car in to the shop to say, yeah, man, there's this light on the dashboard. It keeps telling me to check my engine. It's driving me nuts. It's bugging the hell out of me. Like, I need you to rip that light out. And I mean, the story, it's like most of us that are neglecting preventative maintenance, we have the check engine light on somewhere in our life. We have a signal that's telling us, hey, this isn't working.
Right.
And a lot of us literally operatively are trying to rip the light out. We're just trying to get the signal to go away. We're trying to get our wife to stop complaining. We're trying to get our kids to be better behaved. We're trying to get our anxiety or our hypertension better managed or under control or medicated, instead of recognizing those are check engine lights. The solution's actually under the hood. It's not just try to get the light to turn off. So thank you for what you said. This has been a fantastic conversation. I'm super grateful. I'm grateful for your mission, helping dads. I'm a dad. I need help too. We all need it. How can the world go get more of what you're out there offering?
Yeah, so super easy. If you're a podcast listener, it's not hard to find Dad Edge. It's everywhere. It's even on Pandora Radio now. iHeartRadio, anywhere you download podcasts, it's there. And we've got a YouTube channel, the Dad Edge, Instagram at the Dad Edge, everything's at the Dad Edge. If you're looking for a way to do life with other men, like in a really zoomed out fashion, in other words, like it's not in the trenches, but it's more like, hey, I want to post some questions here and there. We've got a free group called the Dad Edge, Real Dads with Purpose. I think we have 20,000 guys in that group now. And guys just post questions and, they interact and that kind of thing. If you're like, no, I really want the interactive conversation, strategy, and skill sets, that's our mastermind. You can find that at thedadedge.com/alliance. You got to fill out an application. You got to book a call with our team. Just being transparent, it's $500 for the first 3 months and then $97 every month after that. Money well spent. It's cheaper than cable, and the ROI is way higher than your Netflix subscription. I can tell you that.
If you loved that episode, then you're definitely gonna love this one. Check it out.
If being a male is a matter of birthright, being a man is earned. And the way that you earn that is by first being able to take care of yourself. But above and beyond that, a man becomes a man when he learns not only how to take care of himself, but he does that in abundance, so much so that he can now care for and provide for others.